So I'm Heather Goss. I'm EPA's Transportation Liaison to Federal Highway Administration. I'm here to present some updates from our stormwater program here at EPA, and I appreciate the invitation to speak. As Greg said, this is largely based on a slide deck that I or others in our program have presented at a few different venues this year, such as ICOET, over the last few months. I have added some updates to reflect more recent occurrences and also a few additions. But some of you may find a lot of this familiar, so that is by design, because we want to make sure to reach folks in the audience who maybe haven't had the opportunity to attend or weren't available for some of the other presentations. So I'm also assuming I haven't spoken on this venue before, but I'm assuming that the audience is very stormwater savvy. So I'm not going to be defining things like MS4 or Phase 2, assuming that you're already very familiar. And I also imagine that the audience includes a lot of DOT type folks and municipal type folks and researchers. So I'm really glad to have you all here today. And so you know in advance, I don't have an hour's worth of material. This was just the block that was reserved. But I will add a few updates on some related program updates that are not directly in the stormwater program, but are relevant for stormwater folks as well, just because there's so much going on in the Office of Water in the regulatory realm. All right, so Elena, if you could forward to the next slide, I'm hoping this will work. Okay, perfect, great. Okay, so first I'll just start off with some recent MS4 stormwater resources that we have published or made available. So in 2022, we launched a new website on offsite stormwater management. Offsite stormwater management provides a way to meet MS4 post-construction performance standards at a location outside the limit of the area of development under some circumstances. This can provide for additional stormwater management opportunities to achieve water quality goals where sites are otherwise constrained. It can also help achieve additional environmental and planning goals, such as flood mitigation and implementation of stormwater controls and green infrastructure in areas that are not currently undergoing development. So we published the website to house existing resources on offsite stormwater management that were in kind of a lot of different areas on EPA's website, and then some external resources as well. And then we proceeded to publish some additional resources. So one of those is a compendium of MS4 permitting approaches focused on ways that permits have allowed offsite stormwater management arrangements around the country, and some of the conditions that they place on those arrangements, and just different approaches to offsite stormwater management, like different mechanisms that various authorities use. And then we supplemented this by publishing 4 case studies on communities that are using offsite stormwater management, one of which highlights a statewide DOT program, the others are municipalities. And we highlighted some of those case studies in a July webinar as part of our Green Infrastructure webinar series. We also recently posted updates to our Best Management Practice, or BMP, fact sheets. This is a suite of resources to support MS4s. They're organized by the 6 minimum control measures. They were originally prepared in the year 2000, and we did a comprehensive update over the last few years that it's kind of been rolling out. And now the updates all live on our website again. In the next few slides, I'm going to cover the small MS4 rule clarification that was recently put out and stormwater outreach tools. So next slide, please. With the most recent census, the Census Bureau made some changes, including to their program criteria. Where they used to distinguish urbanized areas, now they're only using a broader term, urban area. So EPA's Phase 2 stormwater regulation has been keyed off of that list of urbanized areas. So with the Census Bureau regulation change, we needed to update our own regulation. We proposed very targeted edits to the regulation to update the language that would align with the past scoping under urbanized area, but using new language that aligned with the census's latest approach. On June 7th, 2023, we finalized the rule with the changes that we had proposed on December 2nd of 2022. So the clarifications in this final rule replace the term urbanized area in the Phase 2 regulations with the phrase urban areas with a population of at least 50,000. which is the Census Bureau's longstanding definition of the term urbanized areas. This change allows NPDES permitting authorities to use the 2020 census and future census data in a manner that is consistent with existing longstanding regulatory practice. Next slide, please. Last September, EPA published a suite of communications tools for permittees to use as part of their efforts for the public education and involvement minimum control measures of their permit programs. Many MS4 permittees are small municipalities or other entities where staff and resources for stormwater management are really stretched thin. So we designed materials to help jumpstart or increase permittees' ability to fulfill those public education and outreach efforts. Our goals for the materials were to increase awareness, promote practices to manage stormwater, and inspire investment in the community. We call this program Stormwater Smart. Stormwater Smart tools cover a wide range of topics and can be used for social media, web pages, and also for hard copy handouts or posters. There's a how-to guide that includes suggested text for social media graphics so that program managers should be able to just pick a graphic, add the text, and then measure the responses for how well they're reaching their residents. Excuse me. On the next slides, I'll show some example materials under each of those goals. Next slide, please. For the goal of increasing awareness, the materials explain what stormwater is and how it gets polluted. There are brochures, infographics, and social media graphics like these. Next slide, please. For promoting practices, the materials are focused on getting folks to take stormwater smart steps to protect our waterways. So they include tip sheets that can be used as posters or handouts to help local businesses understand how they can do their part. Next slide, please. The materials developed to inspire investment are designed to help educate municipal officials, elected officials, and financial institutions about the benefits of investing in green infrastructure. There's a template for a PowerPoint presentation to customize with community data, plans and activities, a brochure, infographics, and social media posts that illustrate the value of enhancing stormwater management in the community. There's also a series of case studies of real-world examples of places that have had success with green infrastructure. Next slide, please. We hope that some of you will check out these materials and try them out. We have been promoting them and we continue to promote them at various conferences. I know we're going to be promoting them at StormCon, WEFTech, and Casca in the next month or so. So we hope that folks will try to use them, let us know how they're working for your program and any ideas that you have for future improvements. And that's contact info for my colleague Rachel Urban. She's the team leader for the Stormwater group at EPA. Next slide, please. We maintain a green infrastructure website that contains a lot of helpful resources. I think the website is actually undergoing some redesign, but it's still functional right now, and we're hopefully going to improve it in a way that will be even more user-friendly. So the resources it includes are technical assistance reports, links to case studies about overcoming barriers to green infrastructure adoption, funding resources, and also recorded webcasts. We've had a quarterly webcast since 2014. I've also given links to some recent publications that you'll find there. The first two highlight the value of using green infrastructure to improve resilience to flooding and other climate change impacts. And about 2 years ago, in May of 2021, EPA relaunched the Green Infrastructure Federal Collaborative. So this includes over 12 federal agencies, and its goal is to promote green infrastructure and nature-based solutions. It focuses on interagency coordination and also outreach to the public to help consolidate information on things like accessing funding sources and overcoming barriers to adopting green infrastructure. This year, there were it added 3 implementation committees to that federal collaborative. Those new committees are focused on coordinating technical assistance in regions around the country, building regional permitting networks with expertise in nature-based solutions, and expanding training to include municipal stormwater, floodplain, and emergency managers on green infrastructure topics. Next slide, please. This is kind of a grab bag collection here of some key priority areas that we're tracking in the research arena and in our efforts to collaborate across the agency. So EPA has a lot of initiatives going on to address climate and environmental justice in our work broadly in the agency as a whole. So we're looking at opportunities in the permitting program through our technical assistance and also in our Office of Research and Development's research agenda. And let's see, I'm also highlighting here some key efforts with looking at pollution prevention. So within our program, we updated the industrial stormwater fact sheets. With our partner offices, there are some great grant programs that are linked here. So like the P2 or pollution prevention program, which can be used for things that are relevant to stormwater. And also the Small Business Innovation Research Program, which provides small grants for innovation support for pollution prevention. And then looking at source control, I'm highlighting several resources and initiatives here. So this includes promising work related to the impacts of street sweeping programs. So one example in particular, Region 1 engaged in a project out of UNH, which drew on previous research on street sweeping as an effective BMP for nutrient reduction in the Midwest. This project has provided recommendations about credits for street sweeping in New Hampshire. And now some communities are implementing a pilot to see how the latest science can inform a crediting scheme for total nitrogen and total phosphorus credits in communities that are targeting leaf fall in their street sweeping. And there's another link to an integrated planning case study that we have on our website. This one highlights how Seattle prioritized street sweeping due to the large pollutant capture expected, and the results are showing it to prove out. So there's also a great deal of work going on in the agency related to emerging contaminants such as PFAS, microplastics, and 6-ppd quinone. Next slide, please. We've been creating resources and tools to support integrated planning. Integrated planning encourages municipalities to think holistically and more long-term about their Clean Water Act requirements and goals to get to water quality improvements faster. So this is just showing we have resources including case studies, a story map, which is really, really great and user-friendly. So I definitely, please check that out if you haven't. And links to example integrated plans that have already been developed around the country. Next slide, please. And the Integrated Planning Toolkit has 3 modules to help permitting authorities connect with communities about integrated planning as an option, to work with them through the planning process and then incorporate those integrated planning projects in the appropriate permitting mechanisms. EPA is offering technical assistance to support states as they use it to engage with permittees in the process. And this is, see, there's a deadline of August 31st, so it's coming up. If this is new to you, please feel free to reach out to my colleague, Heather Huddle, as soon as possible. I know that deadline is coming up, but there's still time. And let's see, next slide, please. Our team is currently updating the latest version of our summary table on federal financing for our federal funding for green infrastructure. That project helps to flag project phases that can be funded through different federal funding programs in different agencies. There's the Water Finance Clearinghouse, which is a searchable tool for funding programs. And they also have some great recorded learning modules and webinar recordings that are stormwater specific. And there's some links here to Clean Water State Revolving Fund or SRF resources and EPA grants. I can get this presentation with links out to this group later, just since I'm pointing to links here, that they will be clickable in the PDF. I also want to acknowledge that there's an exciting new grant program EPA is standing up, the Centers of Excellence for Stormwater Infrastructure Technology. This was authorized in EPA's FY23 budget, so we are currently going through the internal steps of standing up a new grant program. That's a lot of work, so when we have more to share, you will be able to find it at our website. But that's all I can share with you at this point. And also, coming soon through the Inflation Reduction Act, EPA is going to be rolling out some large grant programs to support environmental justice activities, where green infrastructure projects in communities will be highlighted as eligible strategies to mitigate heat, flooding, and drought. So there should be a notice of funding opportunity out on this, and we'll make sure to highlight that on our green infrastructure page. Next slide, please. EPA has a water technical assistance page. This includes a new one-stop shop EPA Water TA request form, where communities can request no-cost direct water technical assistance to evaluate their various water infrastructure needs, including stormwater. And this is part of EPA's ongoing efforts to implement the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, or bill, and ensure that communities, including disadvantaged communities, are able to access this historic funding. The page now also includes specific examples of what types of assistance are available and who is eligible. Environmental finance centers, EPA selected 29 of these in 2022. These centers will deliver targeted technical assistance to local governments, states, tribes, and NGOs to protect public health, safeguard the environment, and advance environmental justice. And these centers in particular will help underserved communities that have historically struggled to access the federal funding to receive the support needed to access resources for water infrastructure improvements. And finally, EPA's Municipal Ombudsman is a great resource. The Ombudsman is an independent, impartial, and confidential resource to assist municipalities in navigating clean water. So this role at the agency, it's a relatively new role as of a couple of years ago. It provides a unique service specifically for utilities and municipalities in identifying technical assistance opportunities for them, brainstorming federal funding options, Clean Water Act flexibilities, integrating planning assistance, and more. So you can connect directly with the Ombudsman through that email. And she actually also has a weekly list of federal clean water resources with a municipal focus that you can subscribe to. I found it to be really helpful, and you can just email her to request a subscription to that. Next slide, please. I also want to point out that an EPA resource isn't from our stormwater program, but it may be of interest to the transportation stormwater community in particular. EPA's Climate Change Adaptation Resource Center contains case studies of communities across the U.S. that are anticipating, planning, and preparing for the impacts of climate change. And there are currently 2 case studies of transportation planning, one from WashDOT and one from Central New Mexico. Next slide, please. So now I'll touch very briefly on some current EPA rulemakings that are outside the realm of stormwater, but they are under the Clean Water Act and they may be of interest to this transportation stormwater type audience. I do not work in these programs, so I'm not able to answer questions on the fly, but I can refer you to folks who do, or to links to learn more about them. So I'm just going to give a really quick overview here. So waters of the U.S., that means which waters are jurisdictional under the Clean Water Act. A lot of people call it WOTUS. There has been a lot of activity on the topic this year. EPA and the Army Corps published a final rule to amend the definition of waters of the U.S. in January of 2023, but the agencies are in receipt of the U.S. Supreme Court's May 25th decision in the case of Sackett versus Environmental Protection Agency. And in light of this decision, the agencies are interpreting the phrase waters of the U.S. consistent with the Supreme Court's decision. So currently, the agencies are developing a rule to amend that January 2023 rule consistent with the Sackett decision. And I'm sure you can read news to tell you more about how exciting that process is. The next one here, Clean Water Act 404. So that's the section covering the permitting program for dredged or fill material that is discharged into waters of the U.S. The The Clean Water Act allows states and tribes to assume administration of the Clean Water Act Section 404 dredge and fill permitting program. To date, only Michigan, New Jersey, and very recently Florida have assumed administration of that program. And the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers retains the permitting authority for the rest of the country. So it's pretty different from 402 or the NPDES program, where in general, almost all states have authorization. 404, it's usually the Army Corps, and there's only 3 states that have assumed authority. So on August 14th of 2023, EPA's proposed rule on 404 appeared in the Federal Register. This rule would streamline and clarify the requirements and steps necessary for states and tribes to administer programs protecting waters from discharges of dredged or fill material without a permit. So you can see there's a link to that. You can find more information about what those changes would look like. And Clean Water Act Section 401. So this is, under this section, a federal agency may not issue a permit or license to conduct any activity that may result in a discharge into waters of the U.S. unless a Section 401 water quality certification is issued or a certification is waived. The Clean Water Act gives states and authorized tribes the authority to grant, deny, or waive certification. So some of the examples of federal licenses and permits subject to 401 include NPDES permits and 404 dredge and fill material permits. So what's going on now with 401? EPA's 2020 rule is still in effect and has been back in effect since April 2022. There is a Q&A document posted on the website regarding the legal activity and status. And in 2022, in June, the administrator signed a proposed rule to improve the Clean Water Act Section 401 certification process. The proposed rule would replace and update the existing rule to be more consistent with the statutory text of the 1972 Clean Water Act and clarify elements of the 401 certification practice that have evolved over the past 50 years since the 1972 Clean Water Act. So that was proposed in the Federal Register in June of 2022. So that is the end of my slides. I think you can, if you can advance one more, I think there's my contact info, perhaps. Yes, perfect. So that is my email right there. I'm very happy to hear from folks. And I guess, Elena, shall I turn it back to you?